Chapter 2: From Control to Connection. Control is tempting, especially when the stakes rise, especially when time compresses, especially when responsibility sits squarely on your shoulders and the outcome has your name attached to it. Under pressure, control feels like leadership. You step in, you decide, you direct, you make sure nothing slips. From the outside, it looks decisive. From the inside, it feels responsible. And for a moment, sometimes even longer, it works. That's why control is so hard to let go of. I didn't realize how much I relied on it until I noticed how often people were waiting on me, waiting for answers, waiting for approval, waiting for direction. What I thought was leadership was actually dependence wearing a disguise. Control doesn't just manage outcomes, it trains behavior. Most leaders don't believe they are controlling, they believe they are helping. They answer questions quickly to keep things moving. They revise work because they know the standard. They step in early to prevent mistakes. Each action makes sense in isolation. Taken together, they send a message no leader intends to send. Don't think too far ahead. I've got it. At first, the team complies. Then they adapt. Over time, they disengage. Not emotionally, but intellectually. Ideas soften, initiative slows. People stop bringing problems with solutions because experience has taught them the solution will be overridden anyway. Culture doesn't create resistance, it creates retreat. And retreat is quiet. Connection feels different, especially to leaders who have been rewarded for decisiveness. Connection doesn't remove authority, but it does redistribute responsibility. It requires leaders to stay accountable for outcomes without becoming the point through which every decision must pass. It replaces certainty with clarity and speed with alignment. That feels uncomfortable at first. Connection asks leaders to pause when their instinct says move faster. It invites questions where directives would be easier. It requires explanation where correction would be quicker. Under pressure, that can feel reckless. It isn't. It's disciplined. The difference between control and connection isn't style, it's belief. Control assumes people need to be managed closely to perform well. Connection assumes people want to do meaningful work and need context, trust, and clarity to do it well. Under pressure, leaders review which belief they actually hold. Control narrows leadership to the individual. Connection expands leadership throughout the team. Control makes the leader indispensable. Connection makes the team capable. That's the trade. And that's why pressure exposes leadership so quickly. Many leaders worry that connection lowers standards. It doesn't. Connection raises standards because expectations become shared instead of enforced. When people understand why something matters, they protect it. When they feel trusted, they hold themselves accountable. When ownership is real, leaders no longer have to chase performance. It shows up. Control enforces compliance. Connection builds commitment. Compliance survives supervision. Commitment survives pressure. There is a real cost to connection, especially early on. It costs time when time feels scarce. It costs patience when urgency is loud. It costs ego when leaders are used to being the answer. Leaders who shift from control to connection often feel less effective before they feel more impactful. They spend more time listening than directing. They answer fewer questions directly and ask more questions in return. From the outside, it can look like hesitation. In reality, it's restraint. And restraint under pressure is not a weakness, it's a strength. Control produces results that depend on the leader's presence. Connection produces results that endure the leader's absence. The distinction matters when pressure is constant. When leaders rely on control, performance becomes fragile. Everything runs through them. When leaders rely on connection, performance becomes distributed. The team moves even when a leader steps back. That's why people-first leadership isn't soft, it's durable. It creates teams that absorb pressure instead of amplifying it. It surfaces problems earlier instead of hiding them. It builds capacity instead of bottlenecks. Control keeps leaders busy. Connections make leaders effective. The shift from control to connection doesn't happen in a single decision. It happens in moments. In the meeting where a leader pauses before answering. In the conversation where feedback is explained instead of delivered. In the decision where context is shared instead of withheld. Those moments compound. They tell people whether leadership lives at the top or whether leadership is something they are trusted to carry. Under pressure, those signals multiply, and they determine whether the team tightens up or it steps up. Pressure will always tempt leaders to reclaim control. Deadlines shorten, stakes rise, mistakes feel more expensive. The urge to step in becomes stronger. Leaders who are built for pressure learn to recognize that urge without surrendering to it. They choose connection not because it's comfortable, but because it works. They understand the fastest path through pressure is rarely the strongest one. Strength comes from people who feel trusted, clear, and capable. Connection builds that strength. Leadership isn't about choosing control or connection once. It's about choosing it repeatedly, especially when pressure argues otherwise. That choice shapes the culture you build, the capacity you create, and the results you sustain. In the next chapter, we'll look at what happens when leaders don't make that choice intentionally and how accidental cultures form by default. Because control happens automatically, connection has to be built. That concludes this episode of Built for Pressure. Built for Pressure is a copyrighted work by Richard Levene, all rights reserved. This content may not be reproduced, distributed, or repurposed without permission. If this episode resonated, you can find the full framework at richardlevene.com.